on Business for Breakfast. But the world goes on, and the political season starts to heat up with the 2018 elections knocking on our door. November is just a couple months away, 2.5 months, something like that. I mean, pretty crazy when you think about the time span. And there's a new group on the right here in Colorado that had just burst onto the scene a month or two ago. It's called Colorado Rising Action, and its executive director is a very familiar face and voice now in the last few years in Colorado politics and what's been going on in the policy space and so forth. Michael Fields joins us. He is the executive director of Colorado Rising Action. And Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jimmy, it's good to be on with you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's always great to talk with you, my friend. Appreciate you taking the time to join us. So first, let's just kind of introduce everyone to your organization. What is Colorado Rising Action?
Sure. So as you mentioned, we're a new group, an arm of America Rising, which is a national group. And basically we're here to promote conservative principles, hold the left accountable. So a lot of what we do involves tracking. We'll track, candidates, elected officials, get what they're saying at different events around the state. Opposition research. So, looking up people's records, seeing if there's any hypocrisy in what they're saying now versus what they did in the past. And then also rapid response communications as policy issues are talked about, weighing in on that social media wise, press releases, et cetera. And so we're excited to get rolling here in Colorado. And, a lot of these policy issues that we're talking about have huge economic impact for the state of Colorado.
Yeah, and we will dive into those issues in a moment. But your group is being compared to Progress Now Colorado. What do you make of that comparison, and how have they been reacting to you?
Well, not positively. I think they
really, that's shocking.
Yeah, shocking. I know. But yeah, I think there was a need on the right. I came from a group called Americans for Prosperity, which does great grassroots work, door to door, talking to people. But I think the left in this state has built up an infrastructure, for the last 14 years or so, where they are constantly talking about issues. They have an echo chamber. And on the right, we have some really good groups, and we wanted to be another voice in that. And so, if we're looked at as a counter to Progress Now, I think that's a good thing.
So in terms of, you just mentioned a lot of different groups on the right in this state. Mm-hmm. What is particularly unique about Colorado Rising Action to the point where it's worth having another group that folks can get involved with their support?
I think the tracking part is a huge one. People are out there saying things all the time. Jared Polis is out doing events, Phil Weiser, the Governor Hickenlooper. It's hard to have people around all the time capturing that, and that's kind of one of our expertise. But then that opposition research side. Nationally, America Rising is probably the premier group in terms of, coming up with books and books on different people. They're already looking at the 2020 election for president. And so looking at those specific two things, I think really, add to the coalition that we already have. And that echo chamber, are we responding to stuff very quickly? And some groups do. Some groups, have longer term goals. And so I think we've had a good response so far, reception from the different groups. We'll work closely with Independence Institute, Americans for Prosperity. There's countless other ones, Centennial Institute, when we align on different issues. And so, yeah, we're excited about this work and think that it's really necessary.
Now, just kind of looking at one more political dynamic here. I mean, Colorado, this November election, a lot of people I talk to privately are pessimistic, looking out ahead at November and what's going on statewide from the perspective of Republicans and conservatives, and the notion that Colorado is increasingly becoming purple to blue. How do you handicap the political dynamics in the state right now?
I mean, I think it's tough for conservatives, there's no doubt. But I think when you look at the policies that the left are pushing, especially on the ballot, that they're very extreme. And once people understand, that a ballot issue could knock out, basically knock out oil and gas in the state, they're not too excited about that. When they think about single-payer health care, which we shot down, close to 60% a couple of years ago, that a lot of Democrats are pushing that. I think, once you make it issue-based, you have a route and long term and say, you know what, are we staying on message? Are we talking about how we need to fix our roads? Are we talking about how people should be able to vote on tax increases? Making sure that we have less regulations that are, burdening businesses. When you have that conversation, I think long term, this state is still lean center right. But politically, yeah, it's going to be, a tough year. And it's going to kind of be case by case in terms of these races.
And let's kind of talk about a few of these particular issues that you just identified. Michael Fields, again, Executive Director at Colorado Rising Action. Let's talk about healthcare. I mean, you just alluded to the ballot measure that failed a couple of years ago when it came to a single-payer healthcare program. But Jared Polis, the Democratic nominee for governor up against Republican nominee Walker Stapleton, is not only in on the whole idea of single-payer healthcare, he is all in on this notion of sort of a socialized medicine program in the state. What do you make of that? And is that something that plays well to the point where he should be doubling down, or should he be saying, maybe not?
I don't think it plays well. I mean, they think, if they use the terminology Medicare for all, that people will accept it. But I think, the fact that it lost by 60%, close to 60% a couple of years ago. But I think this is getting, Jared Polis is getting caught up in kind of the national discussion, the Bernie Sanders, push to really come up with single payer. And I think that's going to have a backlash. We all want people to have more access and quality care. But this system is going to cost $33 trillion is not the way to do it. And so I think it will come back to hurt him. But, he's out there doing it. And he's basically one of his main campaign promises is to come up with some kind of single payer system. So we'll see how it plays out, but I think it's a mistake here.
And the other big issue that he's tackling in particular is this whole notion of 2035 or 2040 or whenever it is. It's obviously it's too soon in my view, if ever, to have a 100% renewable energy approach. What exactly is the proposal that he's put forward? And I'm presuming you disagree with it. Why?
I do. I think it might be 2040, but I'd have to look at the year exactly. But I think, when government comes in and tells, industries, this is okay, this isn't okay, we have regulations. We have some of the toughest oil and gas regulations in the country. Putting oil and gas out of business in the state, which is virtually what the setbacks ballot issue would do, is not a good idea. I mean, we're going to pay for it, one way or another. And renewable energy sounds great, all across the board. But what's the impact to our pocketbooks? What's the impact to jobs in the oil and gas industry? And so I think this is another one where, these promises, and a lot of this happened by moving to the left during the primary, that everybody was coming up with their new, who can do it quicker renewable energy plan. It's not realistic, or, the cost is going to be so high that people aren't going to be able to handle it. So, yeah, we are against it, and just having those policy discussions are important. Coloradans should know what happens if certain people are elected or if certain policies are put into place.
Now, what would you support as far as any type of proactive energy measure? I mean, obviously, when it comes to renewables, at least in theory, it's very popular, while fracking, for example, is treated very negatively. What would be your vision, your approach?
Well, we already have renewable energy standards in this state, and that was a fight that happened, over a decade ago now. I think that the market should decide that. When it's easier to produce renewable energy, and it's getting, moving in that direction somewhat, when all of the above approach makes sense, and the market will figure out what's the best means, what's the cheapest means with quality. And so I think that isn't something the government should be coming in, telling other people, I'm Jared Polis, or I'm, and the legislators are great. I like a lot of them, but they're not experts on this stuff. And so, I think the market's going to figure that out. In the meantime, we're sitting here looking at, half of the oil and gas business going out by next year, if these setbacks go into place. This is something that government should not be involved in.
Now, you mentioned ballot initiatives, alluded to the one, the setback measure, which we've talked about here on the program before. You also have this new one that I think is going to be named Amendment 73, dealing with an education tax increase. It's one of two attempts at raising taxes statewide. Tell us about that and your thoughts.
Yeah, so that's a $1.6 billion tax increase. Obviously, in 2015 and 2013, they tried billion-dollar tax hikes for education, and I think the backlash was, one, our pension system isn't fixed, and it still isn't. There's, a bill that went through earlier this year that did a little bit of good, but hasn't fixed that problem. I think people are frustrated that more money doesn't go to the classroom. It doesn't go to teachers. Most people think teachers should get paid more, but the bureaucracy in school districts is getting much bigger. And the economic impact of this, it is something that is a hidden tax because corporate tax rates are going to go up, and then individual tax rates that make $150,000 or higher. And so, this is something that I saw, back in Illinois when I lived there was, let's raise taxes on, the quote unquote wealthy. Well, people don't like that, and they might go somewhere else. And so I think until, the education structure fixes the fact that more money isn't going in the classroom, it's not going to teachers, I don't think that people will support this. But the approach that they're taking, taking away kind of our flat tax and moving it to, a system where the wealthy would pay more, could have some appeal to people. So we're watching it. We're going to be against it and trying to educate people about this.
And then the other one is going to be a tax increase for transportation if that does get onto the ballot, as I would think it will, but we don't know yet. That is being put forward by the Denver Chamber of Commerce. And as far as transportation is concerned, there's that. Also, the Independence Institute has I love the name, Fix Our Damn Roads proposal, which is different, focused more on bonding and guaranteeing that there's a portion of state funds that particularly go towards transportation. Between those two measures, or is there a third way? Where do you fall?
I think the Independence Institute is on the right track on it. A tax hike for transportation. One, we need to fix our roads. Everybody agrees with that. The problem is we have a budget that's $30 billion. If that's a top priority, if education is a top priority, why aren't we spending more money on that? Why don't we build the budget around our priorities? And that's what legislators do not do. Then they say we don't have any money left. But there was money. The budget went up $2 billion last year, and they gave a little bit to roads, not nearly enough, and then they go to ask for a tax increase. This is another one that polled very low. It was 17% underwater on initial polling. I don't think that it'll pass. But I think, again, you have to educate people. They need to know how big our current budget is, how that needs to be a priority in it, and have that discussion. So, yeah, these tax increases, especially with that Independence Institute one on there saying we can fix our roads without raising taxes, I think people are going to start moving in that direction.
Talking with Michael Fields, Executive Director of Colorado Rising Action. What else is on your radar screen that might impact people's pocketbooks, economic issues? Anything else that's really facing Colorado right now?
Well, Tabor's always a discussion, and that's why I think, the AG's race is even important, with Phil Weiser and George Brockler, because, do you have people in government and the AGs that'll defend Tabor? Our economy, we are in our state, 2.7% unemployment. U.S. News ranked us as the top economy. How do we stay that way? And I think a big part of that is defending Tabor, letting people vote on tax increases on fiscal policy in that way. Ensures that we don't go along the lines of some of these other states that have lost businesses, have lost individuals. And so that's something that we monitor very closely is the Tabor discussion, and it's a long-term discussion, as you know.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the whole idea of eroding this protection for taxpayers of having the choice to the opportunity to vote on tax increases is incredible. There's a reason why people consistently in this state vote down tax increases, Michael, and they probably wouldn't be too pleased if they didn't have the opportunity to say no and new tax increases were put into place without having the direct say in that way.
Yeah, and the localities, you see local taxes tend to pass a little bit more because people feel like that money is going to specific things for a specific amount of time. That discussion is a healthy discussion to have. People don't mind spending a couple more minutes on their ballot in order to weigh in on how big the government gets. A lot of times, the state level, they're not telling them exactly what they have to spend it on. But, does the government grow? Do they take more of your money or not? it is a very good thing here in Colorado, and I think that it's helped lead to a lot of the economic prosperity that we see.
Once again, Michael Fields, our guest. Let's look at the races that are going on. How do you handicap the statewide challenges?
Well, I think it depends on the race. Governor, obviously, Jared Polis has a lot of money. He's putting more and more in. I saw yesterday he had a $3 million TV ad buy, which means he's well over $13 million that he's put into this race. Obviously his positions are extreme. So, in this kind of rural-urban divide that he played up by not going to the Club 20 debate. So that'll be an interesting race. I think that one will be close. Some of the other ones, Phil Weiser as well, in the AG's race, he raised a lot of money. George Brockler is pretty well known and has some support. Some of these other ones, I think it depends on, what happens. Is there a wave? Is there not a wave? Statewide, a lot of times, down ballot statewide kind of go with, what the mood is in the state at any given time.
And then the state legislature. I mean, this is one where the Republicans razor thin, one vote in the Senate, and then obviously the House on the Democratic side. There is certainly a danger for Republicans, from Republicans' perspective, of losing the state Senate. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's possible. There are probably 4 competitive seats. What you see almost every year is, there's a seat or 2 in Jeffco and a seat or 2 in Adams County, and they make up, what the Senate looks like. And so Republicans have a 1-seat majority. There's a couple of competitive races like Tim Neville, Beth Martinez-Humanic up in Adams County, and there's a lot of money going into those races on both sides. And so, those are very different areas. Jeffco and Adams County, economically, view of the president, very different. And so we'll see how that comes out. But I know that a lot of people are watching that, especially if you have a Jared Polis governor. The state house will probably stay in Democratic hands. It comes down to the state Senate.
I think the only congressional race that is of particular interest, which could potentially flip, God forbid, in my view, is the 6th Congressional District with Congressman Mike Kaufman up against Jason Crow. What do you think about that particular challenge, given the current frame, the current dynamics politically in this state?
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. I think this will be, one of the closest races that Kaufman has ever had. The McCloskey one was pretty close, and then he, obviously beat Romanoff and Carroll pretty easily. But I think this is going to be, because of the year, it's going to be a close one. Mike Kaufman, just for years, has done a really good job of going to every event in the district. He shows up everywhere. The refugee community is very supportive of him. But Jason Crow, military guy, somebody who, we're starting to get more involved in following him around and looking at his record, and it is a liberal record. And so, I think that one of the big issues out there will be the VA hospital. The fact that Jason Crow, was on a committee looking at this, that Mike Kaufman was in the district during that, when that VA hospital was $1 billion over budget. They're kind of both pointing fingers at each other, and it'll be interesting to see who gets credit for trying to get things, set straight, and who kind of takes blame for things falling off the tracks the way they did.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a tough as nails race for him. That's for darn sure. Michael Fields, again, Colorado Rising Action Executive Director. How would you, just a final word here, and then you can also let us know where people can learn more about you and your new organization. How would you express your sense for things as far as optimistic, pessimistic, realistic?
I'm always optimistic about our state, our country. I think, these elections are important. Each session at the legislature is important. But I have a lot of faith in Colorado voters. I have a lot of faith in Tabor. And so, I think, the economy across the country is getting better. It's very good here. So I'm always optimistic. We have 3 kids now, and I wouldn't want to raise them anywhere else. So, we got to stay positive. We got to keep fighting for the principles that we believe in.
And your website?
www.coloradorisingaction.org.
All right, Michael Fields, always a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks for joining us this morning on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jimmy.